My name is Robert Tremblay. I'm the Associate Director of Admissions here at the college, as well as a 2010 graduate. And today what we're going to be focusing on is a continuation of the series that we've been doing on classic cooking methods, really from the culinary arts side of things. So in our previous episodes, we focused on the dry heat cooking methods, where we focused on grilling, roasting, we did some saute, a little bit of pan fry, really kind of mix things up to give students a really brief introduction to that process and understanding of dry heat cooking methods. Today, we're going to turn the coin over a little bit and go into moist heat cooking. When we talk about moist heat cooking, we're talking really about four key elements. We're talking about simmering, where you're going to cook things gently at a low temperature. Typically, if you're going to kind of making like a stew or something to that effect, a gentle simmer is how you would go about cooking that in a liquid environment. We also talk about poaching and shallow poaching, which is really just delicately cooking a tender piece of meat and doing it in a very flavorful liquid. The shallow poaching is going to be a combination of that liquid and steam, so it's kind of a combination cooking, but still referred to as a moist heat cooking environment. Then we also talk about blanching as one of the other key elements of working with a moist cooking environment. We talk about blanching, you're going to talk about working with different types of vegetables, getting them part cooked, and really working with ingredients very delicately, and really working with them and with that nutritional side in mind. It's not about bolstering it with a lot of different flavors and really over intensifying things. It's about taking fresh ingredients and really working with them minimally and doing them to a nice, tender, delicate cooking. So what we're going to focus on today for a moist heat cooking is we're going to do a deep poached salmon, which is a very classic variation of cooking. When we talk about deep poaching, we want to take a nice, tender, flesh piece of meat and actually cook it very delicately at a very low, consistent temperature. So when we talk about simmering, we're talking about really around the 200-degree range, really about 185 degrees to about 200 degrees Fahrenheit is the marker for simmering. When we talk about poaching, we want it to be just a level underneath that. We want our liquid to be at about 165 to about 180 degrees. So that's your range when we talk about the cooking liquid. Also today, we're going to focus on blanching. So we're going to do with our poached salmon, we're going to do some nice blanched broccoli spears to accompany that. And then we're going to round it all together with a beurre blanc sauce, which is a very classic French emulsion type of sauce, where we're actually going to utilize the cooking liquid that we use to make our salmon as part of the reduction for that sauce. So a way to tie all those ingredients together and really build a lot of classic techniques into one really simple and exciting dish from the side of moist heat cooking. So to start off with, I want to talk a little bit about the salmon that we're going to use. We're just going to be using a standard salmon fillet. Really needs to be about 4 to 5 ounces is the general portion size that you're going to be working with in terms of a standard fillet for an entree portion. One important thing that you want to keep in mind with the way that we're going to be cooking this is with the poaching liquid, that's going to be our seasoning. That's going to be the flavor that we're going to be adding to our dish. So at this point, normally if I was going to be searing this or grilling it, I'd want to season it, add some flavors to it, because that cooking process isn't going to be infusing as much flavor to the product as it will be through the poaching side of things. Today we're going to be poaching our salmon in a liquid that's called court bouillon, which literally translates to short stock. So it's really a very simplified stock that utilizes acid as part of it. Normally, when we think about a stock, a vegetable stock, fish, or anything like that, you're not going to add acid to it. It's going to be strictly those components that are going to be coming through for those flavor profiles. If it's chicken stock, it's going to be chicken and vegetables, so on and so forth. But with the court bouillon, it's a really intensified flavor that comes in very quickly. So what I have over here on my right is actually a perfect example of court bouillon, which I made earlier on because it takes about 50 minutes to make it. So basically, it's a combination of your mirepoix. So we've got celery, carrots, onions in there that we simmered. We added about 4 ounces of dry aged white wine vinegar. So that's going to be our acidity. You could use just white wine if you wanted to, or you could add lemon juice if you don't want to use any vinegars or wine-based products in your cooking. Fresh lemon juice really certifies that way. But then on top of those aromatics and the acidity, I added some fresh aromatics on top of that, some fresh herbs. So we did some parsley, we did some thyme. We also had a little bit of garlic in there. So really just thinking about a court bouillon as a really flavorful, quick vegetable stock, but that we infuse with a little bit of vinegar. That's going to help add some flavor and to our product, our salmon that we're going to cook in it. And it's really important to focus on the temperature of this. Now, in some applications of poaching salmon, you can actually start with the liquid at a cold temperature. You can actually refrigerate it and start the fish from start to finish in that cold broth and work its way up to its done temperature. But in this atmosphere, we want to do it a little bit quicker than that, since we have a little bit shorter time with our demo here. We're going to do it with our liquid already at temp. So what I've got this at is about 165 to about 170 degrees. The way that I know that is I actually brought it up to a gentle simmer, and then I killed the heat on that and brought it down to just a gentle simmer underneath that. So there's really no intensified bubbles. You can see that there's some foam on top from the liquid, but there's no intensified air bubbles around the edges or on the surface of the liquid. That's how we know we got it at that perfect temperature. So what I'm going to go do here is I'm actually going to put our fish right into our liquid. Just going to put on a glove really quickly. Okay. And like I said before, normally if we were searing this, we'd be adding salt, pepper, cayenne pepper sometimes for a dish like this, but we really want our seasoning to be a part of our core bouillon. That's what's going to intensify the flavor. We're not going to add seasoning to the protein directly. It's going to come specifically from the liquid. So that's why it's very important to get your cooking liquid right. So we're just going to add in our salmon, and we're going to let that go. It should only take about 6 minutes or so for it to cook all the way through. What we're looking for ultimately in the doneness is about a medium to a medium rare consistency with it. And really what we're looking for is a change in the texture of the fish. It's going to change color. It's going to start to get a little bit gray, but it's also going to start to flare and become firm to the touch. So that's what we're looking for. We're going to leave it at that temperature. I'm going to turn up the heat just a little bit. I'm going to keep an eye on it. We don't want it to get too hot, but we also don't want it to get too low. So it's about using your eyes and managing the temperature of the pan by the visualization. If you start to see bubbles forming, you reduce your heat. And if it stays consistent where we are, we know we've got it at the right temperature. So with that being said, we're going to transition quickly over to our sauce. Okay. And for our beurre blanc now, a beurre blanc sauce is really one of the most classic sauces that you can make. It's really an instant emulsion in the pan. And all we're going to be combining is some of our aromatics, or I should say some of our poaching liquid, some dry aged white wine, and then we're going to do some fresh shallots for our aromatics. So we're going to get these into our pan. Okay. So we had about 4 ounces of our poaching liquid, about 2 ounces of the white wine, and now we're going to add about a tablespoon or so of minced shallot. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to make a reduction out of this. And when we talk about this reduction, we want to bring it down to the stage where it's almost bone dry. We want it to really intensify those flavors. We really want to concentrate the acidity and the pungentness of flavor from our poaching liquid, as well as the white wine that's going in there, and let that the aromatics infuse. Once that gets reduced down, we're going to start to work in some whole unsalted butter. And literally this emulsification is just the proper melting of the whole unsalted butter so that it remains consistent. You can use a binder for this. You can reduce heavy cream if you want to, reduce that by half. Adds kind of a thickening agent to it. If you were going to make this and try to hold it for service, I would encourage you to do that. It gives it a little bit firmer bind, and it'll allow it to hold for longer. But in this state, since we're going to be serving it right away, we really want to just take our time with it and make sure that we get our right consistency here in the pan. And we'll just do that with the reduction of our liquid, our vinegar, and or I should say our wine and our poaching liquid. And then we're going to add in our whole butter in just a little bit. So I've actually got the whole butter in the refrigerator right now, because you want to make sure that it's tight and cold to work into it. So that way the water molecules from the milk fat don't separate and you get a separated sauce. You want everything to stay combined and tight, so that way it stays emulsified. Okay. So while that's happening, while our reduction is coming down, we can let that go for just a little bit. We're going to transition to the blanching of our broccoli spears. So what I've got here in our pot is really just a hard boiling water with extra salt in there. You want to make sure that it tastes like the ocean. I seasoned it ahead of time. And so what we're going to do through the blanching process is we're just going to do a part cook on our broccoli spears. It's only going to take about 2 to 3 minutes to get that part cooked. We want to make sure, especially when we're talking about sort of a larger product when we're blanching, we want to do it in stages because we don't want our broccoli heads to kind of become mushy. We want to make sure that they remain firm and vibrant. So that's why we do a blanch with a dish like this. So we're going to cook it part of the way, take it out, let it cool over here on our resting tray, and then we're going to flash it really quick right before we get ready for service. So I'm going to drop these in, let them do their thing. Just going to stir them around. Now, obviously, I'm using a much larger pot than we really need for the amount of broccoli that we're cooking, but it's a very important thing to keep in mind when working with green vegetables to make sure that they have plenty of space to cook and make sure that they have room to breathe. The more you overfill the pot, the more likelihood that it's going to generate that great coloration on your vegetables. You want them to be able to breathe and you want them to be able to cook evenly so you get a nice doneness on them. So I'm just going to let that go for a couple minutes. I'm going to check our reduction here, which is coming down nicely. We want to take it down further than this. Like I said, we want it to be almost bone dry. So I will show you exactly what we're looking for once we get it down to that point, and then we'll start to work in our butter. You can see that our salmon is coming really nicely. You can see that the coloration is starting to change a little bit. It's going from that deep red color to a little bit more of an off gray color. Our temperature is really nice, but what we're really looking for is really kind of the separation of the fish itself. The flesh of the fish is going to start to flail a little bit and fray. That's how you know you're starting to get it cooked all the way through. And it's also going to be a lot firmer. When you push on it, it's not going to go as far. It's going to be a little bit more firm to the touch. It's going to be closer to what your fist is going to feel like in terms of the doneness. So that's exactly what we're looking for with regard to our salmon, which is coming around nicely. Like I said, this is going to take about 6-7 minutes or so for it to cook all the way through. So our reduction is coming down really nicely. Almost there. Our broccoli spears are cooking perfectly. Just going to give them a quick taste before we move on. We're going to let them go for a little bit longer. The important thing to keep in mind with this, like I said, is you want to make sure that you get a doneness on both ends of it. Since you have the fibrousness of your the broccoli spears, the stem of it itself, it's a little bit tricky to cook them properly. That's why we're going to do it in stages. So once these are cooked on the top with that perfect doneness, I'm going to take them out, let them rest. The carryover heat is going to cook a little bit longer on the stems. If I was just doing the florets, I would really just transition them to an ice bath, shock them, stop that cooking process immediately. But with this, we can cool them down a little bit slower, especially since we're going to be using them right away for service. So important thing to keep in mind. So I'm going to get these out of our water here. Perfect. You can see how bright and green they are. That's exactly what we're looking for. And now this is a trick that I learned from actually one of the chefs here. He was one of my favorite instructors that I had, Chef Freddie B. I don't know if anybody watching knows that name or has seen him do a demo before, but he actually taught me the process of resting them out on the side on a tray to cool them down instead of just dumping them into an ice bath. Sometimes when you dump green vegetables into an ice bath, what it's ultimately going to do is it's going to zap out all of the flavor that you infuse them with the salt. So very important thing that if you have the time to be able to let them cool on their own this way, it's really a great way to maintain the freshness and the flavors that we worked into our broccoli from the get-go. So here you can see our reduction has come down really nicely. We're almost there. It's really going to start to get perfect. We're going to let it go a little bit more, and we'll be right where we need to be to start to work in our butter. Okay. Here we have our butter. So in total, we added about 8 ounces or so of liquid to our pan to reduce down. And to that, we're going to add about 12 ounces of full unsalted butter. Very important to use as high a quality of butter as you can. It's going to have a lot higher milk fat content, which is going to build the emulsification that much better. But really one of the most important things is managing your temperature when you start to work in the butter. If it's too hot of a temperature, it has a tendency to separate the milk fat from the water molecules. And that's what's going to cause your sauce to kind of become mouchard, as we like to say. So you really want to be mindful of that. And our reduction has come down really nicely. And we're going to start to work in our butter now, okay? And you want to do this in stages. You don't want to just dump all of your butter in once. It's about building that emulsification and letting those things stay tight. So we're going to add a little bit here to get started. And I'm going to reduce our heat down here a bit. And now we're going to start to whisk this. And this is a little bit of a labor of love. So this is something that you really want to take your time with. You want to work that butter in. We're going to take it off the heat a little bit just so that we can gradually work in that emulsification. We want everything to stay together. We want our flavors to be vibrant. We want it to all be nice and cohesive. Okay? Salmon is looking perfect over on my right. See, the color has started to change. It's really starting to come together nicely. Add in some more butter here. Once you've brought your butter in and it's melted down all the way and it's started to emulsify, then you can look to add in your next batch. So this does take a little bit of time. This is something that in a lot of restaurants, you're never really going to make a beurre blanc a la minute. It's one of those things that you're going to do ahead of time and have as a base. But this is really, you know, honestly, I think beurre blanc should be kind of considered one of the mother sauces because of the variations that you can add to it. It's such a simple process. It doesn't need any, you know, in-depth thickeners to be able to give it its, you know, its depth of flavor and give it that coating effect. It's really a nice balance that you can add a lot of different palettes to. What I'm going to do to really kind of brighten this up a little bit is I'm going to add some fresh lemon juice to it at the end and some fresh dill to it also. So nothing really better to serve with salmon than a beautiful, you know, dill accompaniment. So adding some dill to a beurre blanc is really a nice little way to intensify the flavors and really kind of bring everything together nicely. So we're going to add in a little bit more butter here. You can see, and if you want to bring in, you can see the consistency that we have here going on in the pan. And beurre blanc literally translates to white butter. So when you think about the sauce, it's not going to have any, you know, dramatic color effects to it. It's really all about that consistency, that simple emulsification of the butter mixing with the white wine and the reduction that we did from the poaching liquid. So there's going to be some connective tissue here in terms of the flavor profiles. And I'm going to wait till the very end to season this because we want to get our consistency right before we start tweaking the seasonings in that effect. Okay, it's coming down really nicely. I'm just going to add in our last bit of butter here. Turn up our heat just a smidge, not too much. And you can see how this whole time that our butter is emulsified into our reduction. So we've got that intensification of flavor, but it's a really nice, well put together sauce that's going to really do really nicely on our salmon. Okay. There. So I'm going to give this a quick taste here, see where we're at with our seasoning. Definitely going to need to season a bit. I'm going to add in some salt, some pepper here. Whisk that in. Now, one important thing with regard to a beurre blanc and a simple way to fix it is that if it does get too hot or it sits too long and it breaks, you can easily get it to emulsify again by just dripping in a little bit of cold ice water, and that'll really help solidify it. It'll allow you to get that emulsification back and tighten up your sauce again. And you can always add in more butter too to re-emulsify it that way, but a quick fix if you're on the line and you need your sauce to come together, is a little bit of cold water will do the trick. Okay, so I'm going to leave our heat very low there. I'm going to add in our fresh lime juice to this. Perfect. I'm going to add in our dill. Beautiful. The amount of aromas in the air right now is just really, really awesome. I'm loving it. You have the elements coming from our poaching liquid. We also have the wine and everything going into this, the fresh dill. It's going to be a really nice combination of flavors to go with everything that we're serving. Perfect. Doesn't get much better than that or simpler than that. So our salmon is looking perfect. I'm going to just put on a glove really quick. Just want to give it a touch before I put it onto our plate. Give it a quick touch, and that's perfect. You can see that we've got the coloration going. The firmness of it is perfect. It's exactly what we're looking for. What you want is to have a little bit of give, but you don't want it to mush all the way in. You want it to bounce back pretty immediately after you're able to push it in. That's the exact firmness that you're looking for, okay? So I'm going to quickly transition this over to our resting plate right here. Perfect. We'll let that sit for just a minute. We're going to quickly flash our broccoli spears. We're going to get them just so that they're hot. Just a quick flash on them here. Perfect. A quick blanch of them just before we get them ready to serve. We're going to transition them into our bowl here. Now you can do a couple of things at this point. You could add a little bit of butter to them, or if you wanted to, we're going to season them just a little bit. So a little bit of salt and pepper here directly to them. Okay. And then we're going to add a little bit more of the fresh lemon juice. So we're going to connect things a little bit that way. It's a really simple approach to this. You don't really need to get fancy with your green veg all the time. Just doing it really simply with the fresh lemon juice and some fresh salt and pepper. Really a nice, perfect way to finish a dish from that perspective. Okay. So we're going to set this over to the side here. We're going to turn off our heat. Perfect. We're going to get our plating station ready. I'm going to put on a glove again. Very important. One of the first things that we learn about at CIA is food safety, which I'm sure if you're in a high school culinary program right now, that's one of the first things that you all focus on going into your kitchens is sanitation and working with food properly. So it's really about managing those types of things when working with all of your ingredients. So we're going to first begin by plating our salmon. This is going to be our starting point for everything. Perfect. Go. And we're going to plate our broccoli. You want those spears to kind of be vibrant and focal point, kind of leading into your salmon, just a simple presentation. You know, food doesn't always have to be over the top for it to be special. It can be the simplest food done in the proper technique and the proper way can really do wonders for your ingredients. So, got our broccoli ready to go. I'm going to finish with plating our sauce right on top. Beautiful, beautiful beurre blanc. Just going to go right down over the top of our salmon here. A bit more. If you want, you can do a little bit of the beurre blanc over the broccoli itself. That'll help also. Perfect. And we're going to finish it with a fresh piece of dill right on top. And there you have it. Perfect deep poached salmon with some blanched broccoli spears to accompany it and a classic beurre blanc sauce. Enjoy.